Good afternoon, and we have reached the end of another working week. Thanks for clicking on to the Friday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. You know the drill by now. Before we continue with the video, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It would be much appreciated. We have another big weekend coming up, as always, here on Mark Vogan Weather, spitting out 7 days a week, unbiased, unhyped weather content here on the channel. And we have the Tropical Outlook tomorrow, and then on Sunday, the all-important and exciting live stream. It will be the 111th edition of the Global Weather and Climate Report, looking back at the recent global weather extremes, and there certainly has been plenty of that, and more winter chat as well. There is high levels of ozone being reported within the stratosphere over the North Pole, and that may be contributing to the stratospheric warming that is ongoing at the moment. Unusually weak polar vortex for the month of September, and that is continuing into the month of October as well. We're going to look at that in a little bit more detail, way over my understanding, if I'm being honest, but I put out a question late last night, and I've had a few people that appear to know a lot more than what I do, and we're going to discuss that in the live stream on Sunday afternoon. And by the way, it's at 4 p.m. this weekend, not 7:30, so 4 p.m. live stream. I'll leave a link in the description below today's video for that this upcoming weekend. Hope you can join me for that. But certainly we have got a lot going on. Let's get right into it. The 10 HPA temperature anomalies. This is looking down over the North Pole, and we continue to see this warming extend from Eastern Asia across the top of the pole, displacing the polar vortex down into the Western Hemisphere side of the pole. In fact, let's actually look at the actual first of all. Instead of the anomaly, let's look at the 10 HPA temperature and heights. So this is how it's looking at the moment here. Minimum pressure down in minus 64 degrees Celsius. This is way up at the 10 millibar level. So this is at the top of the stratosphere. And you can see it's continuing to strengthen. But we are seeing this weakness ongoing at the moment. So yeah, we are seeing a strengthening of the polar vortex, but it's continuing to feel some pressure put on by troposphere up into the stratospheric, forcing these heat fluxes, a lot of blocking within the troposphere that is probably propagating, acting like mountains, and creating a drag within the stratospheric circulation at the moment. Hence why I think we're seeing the warming from Siberia across towards the pole, and it's displacing. You notice here that this core of coldest air should be centered right here, bang slap over the North Pole, but it's forced, displaced to the south. And essentially what I think is the case here is we're going to see the jet stream. Not always the case, and I know this, and again, like I say, this is me explaining the best of my understanding and then putting it to you, that quite often when you look at the 10 millibar structure of the atmosphere, quite often where that polar vortex is positioned, see where you see the yellows and the kind of orangey colours versus the blues and the purples, right on that boundary between the two competing temperature profiles. That is essentially where I believe anyway the jet stream is quite often positioned in the means, and therefore we would likely see a continued south displaced jet due to this displacement, even away up at 10 millibars, right down into the troposphere. Quite often you see this reflection between strat and trope. So you can see here as we continue to play through this loop, we're continuing to see this displacement of the PV. At the end of the loop, you notice here that it is almost trying to get back towards the pole once again. And what I think is happening is we are going to see the polar vortex eventually strengthen. So that is one aspect of many aspects. And another thing that I want to bring up to you is the Madden-Julian oscillation here, something that I bring up all the time. And I think it is extremely important in terms of what it brings to the northern hemispheric pattern. When it's weak, this pulse of enhanced convection, this is the various phases that pulse of enhanced convection can be positioned. And often one fundamental take home is usually when it's in phases 3, 4, and 5, so in the East Indian Ocean, maritime continent is 4 and 5, that generally promotes milder conditions, stronger jet stream, ridging near the Azores, and a low pressure system up towards, say, Iceland and Greenland. So basically, it promotes usually a positive, both the Arctic oscillation, but more so the North Atlantic oscillation when it's in that phase 4 and 5. Even when it's in the Indian Ocean, it's not particularly favourable for a positive NAO. It generally, or negative, should I say, NAO, it generally means a positive when you're going through the Indian Ocean, through the maritime continent in particular. Quite often you've got a warmer pattern. Sometimes it can be wet, sometimes it can be quite dry because you've actually got a stronger Azores high that lifts further north up towards the UK and Ireland with a phase 4 and 5 of the MJO here. It essentially, it's energy that's getting driven up into the mid and high latitude pattern, changes the shape and the strength of the jet stream. The wavelengths, expand and contract when you've got a various phase of the Madden-Julian oscillation. The stronger the phase, the more influence it has on the atmosphere to the north. When the MJO goes through into phases 6, 7, 8, and 1, that tends to promote more of a negative North Atlantic oscillation and blocking within the high latitude pattern. It tends to promote a colder pattern, more so once you get into the winter season as opposed to the autumn season. So obviously the MJO does have slightly different influences. Each phase has different influences depending on the time of the year, essentially. So I hope that makes sense to you, because you can see here, if you look at this graphic here, this basically is quite a nice diagram that I've used for a few years now. I think it was actually Marco Patagna of the Met Office that first showed this graphic. In fact, this is actually off the winter forecast from last year. And you can see here phase 4 and 5, so the maritime continent. What does that mean for the west of Europe and the UK and Ireland? Positive NAO. So this is going out of phase 2 into phases 3, 4. That promotes a mild, unsettled, and UK winter westerly. So more amplification of the jet stream, or more zonal jet stream, should I say. I'll get there in the end. More zonal jet stream when you've got a phase 3 and 4. Then once you go into phases 5, into phases 6, that tends to promote blocking high pressure over the UK and Europe. Then as the MJO continues to rotate through into phases 7 and 8, you can see here, northerly blocking, Greenland high pressure, negative NAO, cold UK in the winter season. And then into phases 1, which essentially we're at the moment here, high over Iceland, low pressure over Europe, less settled in the southern UK. So these are the various phases of the Madden-Julian oscillation. Now, I want to show you something here before we look at the prospects over the next 3 or 4 weeks here with the MJO, because I think it is going to go through the warm phases and then back into the cold phases again over the next 30 or 40 days. So do you understand where I'm coming from here? I'm trying to almost see out the next potential cold-ish spell for the UK and Ireland, western areas of Europe here. So that's the various phases, but I want to show you this first of all. Looking at the GFS ensemble, this is the 500 millibar 5-day increments here. So the upcoming 5 days looks like this. Big old strong area of high pressure, bang slap over Greenland here. Got a fairly active storm track. We've got the systems coming out of the tropics, driving heat into the middle latitude pattern. That energizes the jet stream. It energizes cyclogenesis over the North Atlantic. Notice here how far south the divide between positive and negative is. That means that there's the jet stream position right there, actually as far south as the Azores Islands here. So that is the reason for that, is that block over Greenland here. That is forcing the jet and the storm track further south. But one big caveat to all this is the fact that we've got Hurricane Kirk. I don't know for sure, but it's at Category 4 at the moment. I don't know if it actually reached Category 5 at one point earlier today. I'm not sure about that. We'll look at Kirk in a second, because that may have a direct influence on the UK, Ireland, certainly Western Europe as we progress towards the middle portions of next week here. But up until now, we've got that south displaced jet, we've got that block over Greenland here. There's a negative here just to the west of the UK and Ireland, but essentially this is the script at the moment. The 6 to 10 day, bear in mind that this will be starting to get into the period where Kirk has influence on the Western European pattern. We've got a stretched out trough from Eastern North America into Europe. Still have that Greenland block, if you notice here, but not quite as strong. Then the 11 to 15 day period, we're starting to see changes taking place here. We're starting to weaken that block. Still have a positive heights over the south of Greenland, far north Atlantic. We've got the negative still over Europe and Eastern North America. But we are seeing changes taking place. And the Arctic oscillation is expected to go back towards neutral. And if we look at the NAO, same thing. It looks as if it's expected to go back towards neutral. But this would be as we pass the midpoint of this month. So it's not going to just change all of a sudden here. So therefore, I would expect to still see active pattern, below average temperatures, etc., etc. Towards the end of the month, I think we are going to pull out. And I think one of the reasons for that is down to the Madden-Julian oscillation here as it rotates into the slightly less conducive phases for cold. So it's in phases, it's going into the null phase, which means that we're losing the amplitude of this teleconnection. We're losing its influence, but it is expected to go into phases 5 and 6 here. And if we look at this graphic right here of tropical tidbits, if I can find it, there we go. This is the GFS ensemble. This is a vertical velocity potential here. And you can see at the moment the reasons why the Atlantic is busy, because we've got upward motion, quite strong upward motion over the central and eastern Atlantic basin here, both in the north and the south. But that may also help start to kickstart the Brazilian monsoon, by the way, this enhanced convection over the South Atlantic. Bear in mind we're getting into the summer season down in this part of the world. But across the north, we've got the reasons behind the enhanced activity. We've got Kirk, we've got Leslie. I think there might be possibly one other system, I'm not sure. But that's the reason why. Favourable MJO. But as we progress through the next week or two here, you notice that we're starting to see sinking motion return back to the Atlantic basin. We're seeing rising over Africa, over the Indian Ocean, and then eventually that will start to progress towards the maritime continent. This is us going towards the middle portions of the month. You notice here the greens start to weaken in intensity. Therefore, the model, the GFS, is seeing it going into the null phase. Less amplitude, less influence here. But look at this here. Thursday the 17th of October, upward motion over the maritime continent, sinking motion over the Americas and over the Atlantic basin. That is us going back towards neutral in terms of both the Arctic oscillation and North Atlantic oscillation. But watch this. As we continue to play towards the end of the month, that MJO looks as if, according to the GFS, it's trying to become a little bit more amplified. So you start to see the kind of darker greens reappearing. And it's then starting to spread into phases 6 and 7 and possibly 8. Look at this here. Look at this graphic. What those, just a reminder, what those phases mean. So 5 and 6, blocking high pressure over the UK and Europe here. So do we see higher pressure building, settling things down week 3 and 4 perhaps of October? Remember, there's a lag as well, of course. And then phases 7 and 8, northerly blocking Greenland, high pressure, negative NAO signal here. So interesting times. Is this possibly the modelling shaping up for a cold spell during the month of November? Remember, general idea, La Niñas, which we don't actually officially have yet, by the way, tend to have front-loaded winters. We've had a cool September, we've had a cool-ish October so far, and I think that will continue. I think we'll pull out of this kind of negative NAO signal as we move into week 3 and 4 of October. I think we may possibly end the month of October, begin the month of November on a relatively mild note. And then it wouldn't surprise me if the GFS ensemble has anything with merit in it, we may start to see us going back to phases 7, 8, and 1, and that may set the scene for something much colder towards the middle and second half of November. That is my long-term thoughts as it stands at the moment here. But we are going to look at this in a bit more detail as we go through the next wee while or so. This is the latest IR imagery of Hurricane Kirk. You can see here, very well organized, strong core, deep convection. We've got plenty of outflow getting drafted off the top of the system, venting the system. We've got a conducive environment here for supporting a major system over the central Atlantic basin. Looking at the models here, the GFS ensembles all take it towards the southern half of Ireland and the UK towards the middle portions of next week in the 960s millibars. Looking at the multi-model run here of the same model, just bear with me 1 second. You can see here that we have got the same idea. It's not particularly clear, actually. It's hard to see that. And NHC, let's see what they are showing. So, Hurricane Kirk, currently 140 mile per hour sustained winds, pressure at 938 millibars. And look at this track here. It's taking it towards actually to the south of Ireland and possibly somewhere between northwestern France and southwestern UK here. And it holds hurricane status towards the northwest side of the Azores Islands here. So it's generally in the same latitude as what Cape Cod in eastern portions of the United States. So I've discussed the AO, the NAO, the MJO, and also the polar vortex. Remember to check out the live stream this upcoming weekend here. We're going to look at the ozone and the potential influences of the La Nina, the solar cycle as well, and other very interesting factors. Before we look specifically at the models with regards to the upcoming weekend and in the next week, let's have a quick look at the European view and see what the temperature profile is looking like. In fact, let's actually look at the precipitation first of all, because I know many people are sick and tired of rain. And unfortunately, over the next wee while, it's going to continue to be wet. Look at this here, 4th through the 11th of October, wet than average, with the exceptions of northwestern Scotland. And then as we play through this loop, unfortunately, we are not going to lose that wet signal, folks, all the way out towards the middle of the month. But look at this here, it dries out slightly as we move towards the second half of the month. Is it seeing higher pressure? That is the question. Let's have a look and see what the model is indicating here. So back to the here now, upcoming 5 days, looks like this. South displays trough. That trough then swings bodily in over the UK and northwestern Europe here. And then you can see it kicks out. And then we've got kind of neutral heights over the British Isles and Ireland and northern and central Europe. Higher pressure over the Mediterranean and to the west of the UK and Ireland. If you notice here, how's the temperature anomaly looking like? And we can see what it is showing. Let's get back to the here now. So I don't think we're going to go into like majorly warm setup. This is actually quite interesting. The GFS ensemble has the upcoming 5 days slightly warmer than average. The reason why that is the case is we've got a large area of low pressure that is to the west of the UK at the moment and Ireland. Funny enough, I stepped out with my wife, taking my wife to work there a couple of hours ago and said, oh, it's actually feeling quite mild. It's feeling quite warm actually. And then I thought to myself, well, we've got an area of low pressure to the west, southerly flow, dragging in something a little bit milder. The 6 to 10 day, very different story. And the reason why is we've got lower pressure moving in and then moving out to the east, allowing cold air. Thanks to that block over Greenland, that means northerly flow. Finally, looking at the 11 to 15 day, which takes us out to the 19th of October. So you can see here below average conditions here. So this is a temporary spell of slightly milder than average. And obviously the reasons for that is rather simple. We've got low pressure gathering to the west. Yes, we've got a slight lull in terms of precipitation, but we are going to see the rains gather strength once again as this area of low pressure kind of becomes a little bit more organized, more concentrated. Notice here that if we look at the 850s, you've got that milder air moving out of the South Iberia northwards, Nothing majorly warm, but certainly milder than what it has been anyway. We'll play through this loop, and you can see here the milder conditions getting lifted north here. So we're losing that connection to the north. There's the remnants of Kirk waiting in the wings, big contrast in temperature, stronger jet as a result of that. So go back to the overview chart. There's that area of low pressure spreading this wind and rain across the UK. That is going to be the dominant player through the course of the weekend, by the way. And then it's all eyes on Kirk. The latest run of the GFS has this system running into the southern UK as a 967.68 millibar low, northwestern France, southwestern UK, heavy rain, gale force winds. Likely the strongest winds would be through Biscay and along the Atlantic coast of France here with this. Looking at let's look and see what happens as this system pulls away to the east. Actually deepens. Notice that 957 millibars. So it goes from a weakening tropical system to a strengthening mid-latitude low, because it's obviously made that transition. I explained in yesterday's video the reasons for the transition, losing its warm source. The dynamics change, the driving mechanism behind these lows change completely. As that system exits to the east, it's keeping our eyes closely fixed on this northerly flow. How much cold air digs in on the backside of that system? And also, do we see the possibility of snow? So look at this here. That is a fairly cold air mass coming down on the backside. Let's finally look at the ECMWF, because time is really ticking on actually. Back to the overview chart. You can see here that area of low pressure. It's actually 2 or 3 centers of low pressure. They kind of merge together to become one kind of larger low pressure system itself. ECM has this center well to the west of the UK and Ireland here, but at 967 millibars, and we've got the frontal system bringing heavy rain across Ireland, Northern Ireland, and into the western portions of the UK here. Kind of fragments possibly. No, it doesn't actually, according to the ECMWF. But I thought it fragmented as it moved east there, but it doesn't. Pushes through, then it kind of stumbles its way over the UK, influencing the course of the weekend, and then this is the remnants of Kirk. Now, interestingly enough, the ECMWF has this further south. Again, the reasons why is that block over Greenland. But that's quite interesting. Still bringing some heavy precipitation into the southern UK, north to northeasterly flow. Let's look at the 850 temperatures here and see cold air coming in on the backside. And we'll look at the prospects of that influence as it moves east, probably in Monday's European outlook here, because we're still a long way off. We're still Wednesday, Thursday of next week before this system moves through. But generally, it's an increasingly unsettled weekend to come. Then we'll have all eyes on Kirk early to mid next week here, and then what follows Kirk remains to be seen. Hope you've enjoyed today's video here. Stick around, lots to come over the weekend, and I'll see you tomorrow with the Tropical Outlook. Bye for now.